Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. So ahead of a planned weekend ceasefire and hostage release, our eyes remain trained on the Middle East. So Israel's security cabinet voted to approve the deal between Hamas and Israel, but now that agreement really hinges on votes in Israel's full cabinet. So watching what happens here closely is CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio joining us live now from Tel Aviv. Good to see you, my friend. What can you tell us about the schedule if that full body votes to continue to green light?
Sure. Well, Reed, first off, notably Israel's cabinet is meeting after sunset here on a Friday. This is Shabbat, normally a day of rest, but this indicates how important this discussion is towards approving or rejecting the ceasefire and hostage deal. The cabinet, we understand, has been talking with the Israeli negotiating team who went to Doha. This has been going on, again, from what we understand, over the past 3 or 4 hours. Going into it, the expectation is that this deal would be approved, and this is after that smaller security cabinet meeting did go ahead to suggest to approve it. But that was not without its friction. 2 of the cabinet ministers there, 2 far-right ministers, did vote that deal down. We do know, of course, that it still was able to go ahead. Looking ahead, though, if it passes this second round approval, if you will, there's still one more hurdle that has to happen. Basically, then this deal gets opened up to the public, and people can, and some are expected to file lawsuits to try to stop this. The reason for this is because some of those Palestinian detainees here in Israeli prisons, many of them, they are said to have blood on their hands. So if you were an Israeli family who had a loved one who was killed by someone there, you would expect that you might want to stop them from getting out. So there will be a 24-hour period after that. Let's say we fast forward through that and it gets through. Then we would only see, perhaps on Sunday, perhaps late Sunday afternoon, the first hostages to come out of Gaza.
So that's a lot of information, a flurry of developments yet to fall into place. And Ramy, after dark there, while people are discussing and voting, you have to think about and have a heart for the families of those hostages who are waiting to see what decisions are being made behind closed doors. We know that you have been able to talk to those hostage families. What are they telling you at this late hour?
Yeah, some of them have hope. Some of them are afraid to hope. And the reason for this is because this ceasefire deal has been tantalizingly close over the past several months, on again, off again, ever since last spring. Now we are so close with this cabinet deal hopefully being approved by many people here in Israel. But there's also anxiety, because if you look at the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 process, in effect, there has been a priority given to certain kinds of hostages, right? In phase 1, we expect that women, the elderly, the sick, and the wounded will come out. We do not expect that any healthy young men or male soldiers will come out. That will or should only happen in phase 2. I talked with one brother of a hostage, and he was telling me that it is, his word, torturing to know that he won't be able to even potentially see his brother until after the first 42 days. He said that he feels like relatives of everyone in the hostage community and that he's excited for them, but again, torturing to know that his brother won't be among some of the first few. So there's anxiety. Some are anxious to see their loved ones come out, hopefully sooner, but then there's anxiety for some that they won't see their loved ones soon enough.
33 hostages in question this phase 1, and then 42 days to see this play out. That's if they can get those agreements made under the cover of night. Ramy Inocencio reporting live there. Thank you so much. Be well this weekend. So video tour monitors have our eyes trained solely and squarely on the Supreme Court for this part of our broadcast. The Supreme Court move that upheld a ban of TikTok. That ban is scheduled to go into effect on Sunday. So literally TikTok for TikTok. Take a look at just some of what Justice Neil Gorsuch said in his opinion on the ruling, and this was in addition to the ruling. He said, in part, whether this law will succeed in achieving its ends, I do not know. But the question we face today is not the law's wisdom, only its constitutionality. Given just a handful of days after oral argument and issue of an opinion, I, says Gorsuch, cannot profess the kind of certainty that I would like to. that I would like to have about the arguments and the record before us. All I can say, Gorsuch goes on to write, is that at this time and under these constraints, the problem appears real and the response to it not constitutional. So a reminder for our viewers right now, President Joe Biden, he signed this bipartisan bill from Congress in April of last year that then got kicked up to the high court. But now, fast forward to today, President Joe Biden says he will not implement and he will not enforce the ban and will leave all those details squarely in the lap of Donald Trump. Now, lawmakers who voted for this bill reacted to the ruling on Capitol Hill today. We wanted to let you hear some of their initial reaction.
I think that's good from a rule of law point of view. I thought TikTok's arguments were exceptionally weak. Well, here are a couple things. Number one is that TikTok, there's no need for TikTok to shut down if China will allow TikTok to be sold. But for months now, Beijing has refused to entertain what I understand are multiple offers, substantial offers, to purchase TikTok from all kinds of different people. And it doesn't have to be owned by an American company. It just has to be owned by a company that is not subject to Beijing's control. That's the problem with TikTok now. Why is it a security threat was your question. And the answer is if you have TikTok on your phone currently, it can track your whereabouts, it can read your text messages, it can track your keystrokes, it has access to your phone records. And the problem with that is all of that information is available to and subject to inspection by the government of Beijing. And that's a massive, it's not just a national security threat, it's a personal security threat. So whatever you think of TikTok, you love it, you hate it. The issue with it is its national security problems. If it were sold, that'd be no problem.
The Supreme Court has rightly decided to uphold the requirement that TikTok be sold. I support an extension of time, which can be done by the president based on efforts to sell TikTok. TikTok should not be banned, it should be sold. China should not own it, but it should continue to exist in this country. The Supreme Court's decision opens the way for constructive efforts now to preserve TikTok, which everybody wants, but not under Chinese ownership, enabling that enemy of the United States to surveil, collect information, and present a threat to our national security.
I think it's a terrible idea to ban them from using it. And essentially it is a ban. They say, oh, it's not a ban, it's just a restriction. No, if you have like a company worth $100 billion and you say you got 2 days to sell your company or even 6 months, or then you threaten them with other things, oh, well, we'll say it's antitrust if Facebook wants to buy it or somebody else. There's not that many people with $100 billion sitting around. It's a terrible idea to do this. It's a terrible precedent to say we're going to shut down on speech. Some people say, oh, well, China bans apps. Yeah, they're an authoritarian country. That's why we're not China. We should not be banning speech. Terrible decision.
So CBS News crew is taking the temperature of senators there. Certainly more senators to talk to. But again, really, it all comes down to Donald Trump and all eyes are on him. What will he do? We're getting some clues on his social media platform today. He says right here, the Supreme Court decision was expected and everyone must respect it. My decision on TikTok will be made in the not too distant future, but the president-elect goes on to say, I must have time to review the situation, so stay tuned. So let's continue the conversation and bring in CBS News Supreme Court reporter Catherine Cole. Catherine, good to have you with us. Break this down for us. No dissenting opinion. So what do you make of those remarks by Justice Gorsuch?
Yeah, no dissenting opinions. This is a resounding 9-0 defeat for TikTok and a decisive victory for the government, which argued that the national security concerns identified by Congress were sufficient for to impose this burden on TikTok. TikTok tried to make a First Amendment argument, and the court, speaking with one voice here in an opinion without any author, sort of emphasizing that the court is unanimous here, said those First Amendment problems, we don't see them. I think you're right to note Justice Gorsuch's opinion. So he says, I agree with the bottom line. I'm on board. I just have a few additional thoughts of my own. And what I really pick up from him, he was maybe the most pro-free speech voice at oral argument last week. I think he's saying even considering my real hesitation to potentially step on free speech concerns, this law still passes constitutional muster. And he emphasizes, of course, this has been an incredibly expedited review process, right? Because of that January 19th deadline, this case came to the court quickly, briefing was quickly, oral argument was last week, and the decisions today. He's saying we didn't have a lot of time to look at it, and I'm concerned about free speech. But even there, on top of all of those things, I still think that this law is fine.
Well, and in recent hours, President Joe Biden signaling he's not going to enforce or implement this ban. He's essentially kicking it over to the president-elect. And it really bears mentioning that going into the inauguration, sitting close to the president-elect is one of TikTok's top bosses. Donald Trump has said he warmed to TikTok. So what are his options there, and how could that shape the future of the app?
Yeah, the ball is in President Trump's court at this point in time. So you can see why the TikTok CEO has been getting closer to him more recently. Here's how this is going to work on Sunday. The enforcement mechanism of this law really acts on the service providers, the app stores, the tech companies that work as the intermediary between you, the TikTok user, and TikTok itself. And if they essentially enable your access to TikTok, they face potential quite serious financial penalties. And so what Biden is saying is, we're not going to enforce that. What President Trump could do is say, as a matter of my administration's policy, we're also not going to enforce that. That's one path. See if that works. He could also try and lean on Congress to get this law repealed, although I don't think there's appetite on the Hill for that. Or he could try and, he's hinted at an executive order. It's unclear what that would look like, some sort of quasi-legislative attempt to assert his own power here. That would probably set the stage for future legal challenges. It would depend on the details there, which of course are unknown. As President Trump himself said, he needs time to review the situation. So it could be a minute before we find out.
Right, and he says he needs the time to reassess the situation, but you know, he is famously self-sold to the American public as a deal maker, as a businessman. So it'll be very fascinating to see what moves he makes that will be that pro-business mandate that he sold to voters on the campaign trail. I also have another question. So does what happened today with the Supreme Court really open the door for Congress to ban other social media platforms that maybe run or have a hand in governments that are seen adverse to the objectives of the United States?
Yeah, I think the Supreme Court is very wary of not doing that. And I'm looking at this first line. I've got the opinion right in front of me that says, we are conscious that that this case involves new technologies and that this challenging new context, it counsels caution on our part. What they're saying is this is narrow. We're not going to open the door for broad social media bans, First Amendment violations. This is this app, this law, this context, this weekend, and that's it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the conversation. It is fascinating when you see the Supreme Court vote unanimously on anything. That, in and of itself, is newsmaking. All right. So CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland joins us live now from Capitol Hill. Scott, at any moment now, we are expected to hear who could fill the Senate seat that was held by incoming Vice President J.D. Vance. What are you hearing there?
Yeah, the lieutenant governor of Ohio appears earmarked for this position. John Husted has been around Ohio politics a long time. He was 20 years ago the Speaker of the House there. He was a Secretary of State. He's been the lieutenant governor for about 7 years. He has the ear, obviously, of the governor, Mike DeWine, and he would be filling, interestingly, Reed, a Senate seat Mike DeWine once held before he was defeated for re-election in 2006. He comes from the same political sphere in Ohio J.D. Vance does, a close Trump ally from the MAGA wing of the Republican Party, which is so impactful in this Senate where it's a 53-47 Republican majority and they can lose just 3 votes on anything and still get it passed. It was a priority of Trump's team and his allies in the Senate to have a reliable Trump surrogate in this Ohio Senate seat for the next 2 years, and John Husted seems to fit that bill.
Scott, I also want to ask you about this. Cold weather in Washington, D.C. It's moving that inauguration ceremony inside, something you broke here on CBS News 24/7. So where are all the guests going to go?
Well, some of the guests are being urged to reroute to the basketball arena in town, where there's going to be a rally on Sunday with President-elect Trump and then an indoor version of the presidential inaugural parade after the swearing in on Monday. The arena sits about 20,000 people. It's a pretty standard-sized basketball arena. NHL team plays there. A very, very bad NBA team plays there. There's enough room for a decent-sized gathering, not an inaugural-sized gathering. It would be roughly 1 in 10 the size of the crowd that was ticketed for the inauguration that would fit into the arena. That's something, but the optics are going to be so different. The Capitol Rotunda is an enormous space. It's an historic space. It looks grand if you see it in person, but on TV it's going to feel claustrophobic. They're going to put in as many people as they comfortably and safely can put in there, presumably including all those VIPs, Congress itself, some of the Trump inner circle, but the crowds who've been such a component of Donald Trump's public events, rallies, campaign events, they will not be in the Capitol for this. This will be a different looking event for the first time in 40 years.
Right, and when we have the crowd size conversation, this could very much influence that. We know 250,000 ticket holders reported they are coming to our nation's capital. Pretty fascinating there. So let's talk about confirmation hearings, because I know that has dominated headlines and will, especially going into the dinner time hours. Grilling Kristi Noem. You know, it's fascinating to me to see her potential role, if she's confirmed, as it relates to immigration and mass deportations. That was a campaign promise. What does the future of the department that she would lead look like if she's confirmed? The devil's in the details, right, relative to mass deportations.
This is such a big priority for the president-elect, who very much campaigned unequivocally on border issues, in his words, closing the border, which is a bit of a phrase of art than of science. Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, has some long enmeshed relationships here on Capitol Hill. As a former member of the U.S. House, she knows a lot of the people who are questioning her today. She continued to emphasize, as Trump has, that it's a day one initial priority to change some of the border policies Washington executes. So they're going to try to get her confirmed very early in the time frame. I think a lot of Republicans are bullish on doing this the first week of the Trump administration. But here's the sneaky thing about the Department of Homeland Security. It is sneaky huge. Sweeping oversight over so many federal agencies, more than 100,000 different federal employees. She oversees FEMA, disaster relief, oversees the Secret Service, which she has pledged to review based on what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, July 13th. There is such an enormity to the department. It really is more than just immigration policy. Some of the questions went in that direction today, but there's no indication whatsoever, Reed, anything is standing in the way of Kristi Noem and a pretty overwhelming confirmation.
Fascinating conversation. Scott McFarland, American history being written in real time, and you are one with the pen. Thank you so much. Good to talk to you. All right, when we come back, let's talk about turning a political page. You have known him prior as Senator J.D. Vance. Now you're going to get a new title, Vice President J.D. Vance. But that means there's a job opening for the Ohio Senate seat. Coming up, you're seeing that podium right there. We expect at any moment to learn who will replace J.D. Vance as he moves on to be our nation's next vice president. Stay with us. Welcome back. When we see it, you see it. So to Ohio right now, where we are in real time learning who is going to fill the vacated Senate seat of J.D. Vance. Let's listen in.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. As we all know, this coming Monday at 12 noon, Ohio's own J.D. Vance will be sworn in as Vice President of the United States. We are very proud of him. We are very proud of the fact that an Ohioan will be Vice President of the United States. We wish him all the best, and we certainly wish President Trump all the best as well. When there is a vacancy in the United States Senate, that is a different thing. It does not occur very often. Since 1913, Ohioans and people across this country, citizens across this country, have had the ability to select the U.S. Senator. Ohio law provides that when there is a vacancy in the United States Senate, it is the governor who makes that interim appointment. And so I have the obligation to make an appointment, which I'm told will basically last until after the 2026 election. I think December 15th is the normal time when the new person who is elected, or that person continues to be run and be in office. So this is an unusual situation. And it's, frankly, a very heavy responsibility, and it's a responsibility that I take very seriously. It was my honor and privilege to serve in the United States Senate, to represent the people of Ohio for 2 terms, 12 years. I think I have a pretty good idea of what it takes to succeed in the United States Senate, what it takes to represent your state. As I was looking for the right person, I wanted someone who knew Ohio. Ohio is a complex state. You drive across it, you think it's all farmland, and yet we have 6 or 7 major metropolitan areas, more than virtually any state in the Union. It is diverse in so many different ways, and it takes a while, candidly, to get to know this state. So I wanted someone who had a firm grasp and understanding of the complexity of Ohio, the diversity, and frankly, the greatness of Ohio. I also wanted someone who understands the interaction between the federal government and the state government. There is so much interaction, and so much of what we do, what I do as governor, what any governor can do is impacted not just by the laws passed by Congress, but also, frankly, by the different rules and regulations put forward by the president and by the executive branch. But it's an intricate relationship. I wanted someone who understood that. Third, I wanted someone who, frankly, would go to the United States Senate and work. I wanted a workhorse. I wanted someone who I knew would get up in the morning every single day, focus on Ohio, focus on the people here, but also focus on the obligation that senator had for the whole country. To state the obvious, there are only 100 of them. There's only 100 United States senators, and each one can play a major role. One of the things I found different between the House and the Senate, and I served in both, is that when you walk into the United States Senate, whether you're the most junior member or the most senior, you can make a difference. And you can make a difference whether you're in the minority party or whether you're in the majority party. We need, this is a serious time in our history. I won't go into all the reasons why, but I think if you look at foreign affairs, if you look at national defense, if you look at the international situation today, if you look at where our defense is, the United States Senator plays a major role and can play and does play a major role in regard to our national security. And so, again, serious times demand serious people. Finally, the next person who goes to the U.S. Senate, I knew would have to run and run and run. We're used to 6-year terms, but this person I knew would, after I appointed them, could only serve for 2 years. They would have to run for re-election or run for election, and then if they won, they would have to turn around and run again in 2 years. So it had to be someone who I knew, frankly, who had the skill sets, but also the determination, had it, frankly, in their gut, that they could get up in the morning and do this day after day after day, and at the same time carry on their great duties as a United States Senator. The process we went through took a while, and it took a while because of the gravity of this decision. I interviewed a large number of people. We heard from a large number of people. There were many people who I considered very qualified to serve in the United States Senate to represent the state of Ohio. But I came to the conclusion, as you see, that the person who is best suited to be the United States Senator is a person who has been close to me for the last 6 years, a person who almost daily I work with, and that is Lieutenant Governor John Huston. I have worked with him. I have seen him. I know his knowledge of Ohio. I know his heart. I know what he cares about. I know his skills. And all of that tells me that he is the right person for this job. In every major decision that I have made in the last 6 years as governor of the state of Ohio, John Huston has played a part in that decision. And those times We all don't agree on everything. Fran points out that she and I don't agree on everything. So it should not be a shock that John and I might disagree on some things. But even in the cases where he saw things differently, my decision was informed and was helped by his input. If you look at the specific areas where he has been involved, I started to
Listening live to Ohio Governor Mike DeWine tapping Lieutenant Governor John Husted to replace Senator J.D. Vance in Congress. As soon as Mr. Husted steps to that podium to speak, we will bring it to here on CBS News 24/7. But Mr. Husted is known as being a fiscal conservative. He served deeply in Ohio state government. By the way, endorsements, just getting a quick read on him and who he is, because he will be casting a vote in the Republican-led Senate, endorsed by the Ohio Right to Life Association, the National Rifle Association, and the Christian Home Educators Association. Once again, when he steps in front of that podium, you will hear from the man who will now wear the title of senator, taking the place of J.D. Vance, who is now going to be our nation's vice president on Inauguration Day. So let's take the focus now back to Southern California. We continue to see this devastation playing out and the work to put out those hot spots. So let's talk about the firefighters. In Southern California, they have the weekend to really try to boost those containment numbers, as they do expect some of those harsh winds entering LA County to die down. But get this, 80,000 people are out of their homes, and now they're hearing of a new warning: landslides and toxic chemicals, and that only adds to the risks. CBS News reporter Andres Gutierrez in Pacific Palisades. He is live there outside of one of those burned out homes. You know, my friend, if I am one of those homeowners, I want to get in, I want to sift through and see what remains. I want to maybe even start hauling some things away. You're saying that they can't get in and really touch anything in a formative way?
Correct. At this point, the county has said that they have to have professionals come in and assess the situation. What kind of hazardous materials burned? How are they going to remove it? In some cases, as I pointed out earlier, there are some electric vehicles that are sitting in the garages, in the parking lots there, that have to have those lithium-ion batteries that have the risk of catching fire, even though the fire is out. It's also emitting, toxic chemicals, and so they're looking at other best practices from previous disasters, like the one in Hawaii and Maui in 2023, to see how they disposed of those and how they could apply that to here. In the last 10 minutes, we received an alert from the mayor's office that at 2 o'clock our time here locally, at 5 o'clock Eastern, she will be making a major announcement in the rebuilding process, so we're going to monitor that as well. Right now, here in the heart of the disaster, there are public works crews that are trying to make repairs to those lines that were damaged during the fire. EPA crews also going to lots like this, trying to make those assessment of those hazardous materials. The LA Sheriff's Department has also issued a warning to all the deputies, the ones working over in the Altadena area, to make sure that they are wearing their N95 masks, because they're saying that the air is hazardous. It can contain lead and asbestos, and they're also asking those deputies to make sure that they decontaminate, wash their uniforms before they head home. So a lot of safeguards being taken in place here because of all the risks that are in the environment now because of these wildfires.
And Andres, looking at that burned out house behind you, it's so easy to forget that that is somebody's home there, or what remains of somebody's home, and that the family that belonged to that house and those now ruins is looking for a place to stay. There's also a big conversation happening in the state of California, led by Rob Bonta, the Attorney General there, about price gouging and the fact that they are tracking in real time people who would jack up the price of rent or the price of short-term stays. What do you know about that?
Yeah, so before these disasters occurred, the housing market here in LA, as you know, was pretty tight. And so now these folks are getting out there. They're trying to find a short-term rental. A lot of these landlords have unfortunately been taking advantage of the situation. And we have seen on social media, people have been posting, screenshots of Zillow postings that have shot up 67%. That is against state law. The Attorney General for the state of California coming out and saying that they cannot do that. When there's an emergency like this, prices cannot go up more than than 10%. His office has opened investigations into these allegations of price gouging. They are encouraging folks who are experiencing this or seeing price gouging to take screenshots and email them or give them a call. There is a specific hotline. I'll give you that hotline if you want to take it down. It is 800-952-5225. Again, 800-952-5225. There are the punishments if you are caught, and if they do this investigation and they carry it out, the penalties can up to a year in jail or up to a $10,000 fine. And so the Attorney General here in California taking this very seriously.
All right, Andres Gutierrez, thank you so much for that update. And let's talk to Jess right now, because we understand there's a little window of opportunity before Monday when the winds are supposed to kick back up again.
You know, let's talk about that real fast. We're going to start seeing more Santa Ana winds as we head into Monday and Tuesday, yes. But they're not going to be nearly as strong as what we experienced last week or earlier this week. Yes, it's just the same direction, because right now what we're getting is that nice Pacific breeze along the California coastline that they're used to that helps relative humidity increase. It's coming in from the Pacific, so it's a little bit cooler too. It's going to look different as we head into early next week. And so that's that window that we were kind of just mentioning. They're going to get those offshore winds once again for Monday and Tuesday, but right now it looks a lot different. We dive all the way down into Southern California, the Palisades fire along the coast near Malibu, the Eaton fire all the way up near Pasadena, and of course all throughout Altadena. We continue to keep a close eye on the containment of those fires and also the weather conditions too. That was such the driving force when it came to watching these blow up in size. And now what's happening right now, winds are significantly light. I mean, at gusts we're seeing close to around 3-mile-per-hour winds pushing in from the Pacific, and heading into the next couple hours we'll continue to really watch these light conditions stick around. That's the case for us as we head all the way into our Monday forecast, except for the fact that we start to see them kick up just a little bit more. At max, close to around 20-mile-per-hour wind gusts as we head into our Monday forecast. By Tuesday, we'll continue to see that kind of die down. But that shift of winds, of course, still causes a concern when it comes to lower relative humidity. It's high right now. It's starting to decrease as we head into early next week in those forecasted models. So, like I said, these winds that we're talking about, you know, you don't want to strike fear for them, but you do want them to know what they can expect as we head into this weekend. It is going to be lighter this weekend. By Monday and Tuesday, they'll start getting those offshore winds, which makes it a little bit challenging for the firefighters out there battling these fires.
Okay, and Mother Nature's also dominating headlines over in Washington, D.C. because it's going to be frigid for the inauguration. So coming up, we're going to be talking about the impacts of weather on the inauguration of President-elect Donald Trump and the fact that 20,000 people will get to go inside. What about the 230,000 other ticket holders who will be traveling to our nation's capital? Much more ahead on Mother Nature interfering with plans for the inauguration of our nation's next president. Makes you wonder who Mother Nature would have voted for had she been able to cast a vote. Welcome back, everybody. So we're watching changes in the weather that affect the inauguration of President-elect Donald Trump. So let's go to much warmer territory. CBS News political reporter Aaron Navarro right now. Aaron, what is the breaking news relative to the inauguration and the prior plans to hold it outside?
Well, we heard from President-elect Trump this morning announce that they are going to be moving the inauguration speech, including his own address, in the rotunda in the U.S. Capitol. And we're still waiting to hear what happens from those folks who have bought tickets, as you mentioned right before the break. We do know that Trump is hosting a sort of live stream of his address at the Capital One Arena in Washington, D.C., but the capacity there is only about a bit more than 20,000. So we'll see what the other ticket holders end up doing. Other events such as the Sunday rally he was going to hold in Capital One, some of the inauguration balls that Monday evening, Trump has said will remain on schedule.
All right, Aaron, I want to ask you about this because we know that so much of Donald Trump's ability to deliver on his campaign promises really hinges on whether he has the support in the House and in the Senate. Just moments ago, we heard Ohio Governor Mike DeWine talk about Mr. Husted, who is now going to replace J.D. Vance in the Senate. Any early readout from the Trump administration on how he feels about the governor's choice to send in Mr. Husted to Congress?
Yeah, we haven't heard anything officially from the president-elect. We do know from reports and sources that he had been pushing for Vivek Ramaswamy, the 2024 candidate who ran against him, but Trump has tapped him to lead the DOGE agency with Elon Musk. We do know that Governor DeWine of Ohio had met with Ramaswamy in recent weeks, potentially about the Senate role. DeWine instead went with a close ally in his lieutenant governor, John Husted. But Ohio operative familiar with Vivek Ramaswamy's thinking tells us that his plan to get accomplishments done with the DOGE agency and then launch a run for Ohio governor in 2026 is still his plan. Interesting to follow in the coming years.
All right, Aaron Navarro, nice to talk to you. We hope if you are assigned to be in Washington, D.C. to cover the inauguration that you bring some of that warm weather with you in your pocket. We have a feeling you're going to need it. You're watching CBS News 24/7. President Joe Biden about to give one of his last speeches of his presidency to mayors in our country. Stay tuned. Our monitors take us to Cape Town, South Africa, and a tragedy inside a gold mine after a standoff between police and miners who were accused of mining illegally there. That standoff caused more than 100 of those miners to be sealed inside for many days. And now this, at this hour, rescuers are lowering a cage into that gold mine to search for any survivors. This crackdown on illegal mining ended with those people feeling trapped and indeed being trapped. We are now getting word from deep inside the earth from survivors hoping to be plucked out, by the way, in one of these cages that you're seeing here, that 87 of their co-workers, maybe more, are dead. Here's an update from CBS News foreign correspondent Chris Livesay.
Well, it's a police operation that was intended to curb illegal mining, but it went much further than that, and now authorities are under harsh scrutiny for alleged draconian measures that led to those dozens and dozens of deaths and many more who were injured. Now, it all started back in August when authorities cut off food and water to those underground. It's a tactic that was intended to compel their surrender, but it eventually led to miners succumbing to starvation and dehydration. Following a court mandate, a rescue operation commenced earlier this week. Back on Monday, more than 240 survivors were brought to the surface, many in severely emaciated conditions after enduring more than 5 months underground. 87 bodies were also recovered. Now, South African authorities are under intense criticism from both labor unions and human rights groups. It's a practice, illegal mining that is, that reportedly cost South Africa $3 billion last year. Back to you.
Livesay reporting there. So South African police say all of the miners who survived will be arrested when they come out in that cage right there. And once they are pulled out of the center of the earth there, they will be charged with illegal mining and trespassing. Now this. CBS News Eye on America series keeps our focus where it belongs, right? Your stories, your neighborhoods. So in the wake of Southern California wildfires, we look at other communities who have endured loss and have faced the grim task of rebuilding and who've done it. CBS News correspondent David Schechter returned to a Colorado town destroyed by fire to show us something known as a passive design approach. Watch.
You want a little bit of yogurt, bud?
It's hard to miss that 4-year-old Alex Ela is enjoying having a news photographer visit his new house. It's nice to have something to smile about.
The fire was 2 days before his first birthday.
Let's go.
We're going to go now. We're going.
A wildfire still tearing through Boulder County.
The Marshall Fire was the worst in Colorado history. Eric Ela's family lost their home, 2 cats, and have lived in 4 places in 3 years.
It's like, oh, we're going to the new home, or we're going back to the new home. It's like, no, this is the home. Yeah. We're home now.
We're staying.
Yeah.
When it came time to rebuild in their town of Superior, where new construction is everywhere, the Elas chose a design concept called Passive House. It behaves different in a fire than a traditional house, where embers get sucked inside through roof vents. It's one of the reasons why we've seen homes in Los Angeles burning from the inside out. something the passive home seeks to prevent.
There's very few places for an ember to get caught.
Johnny Rizvani, who supplies materials for passive homes, is telling us compared to the roof vents on most houses, this house has just a single air intake, and inside a powerful filtration system that controls the flow of air, keeping the embers out.
As opposed to most homes, you've got a lot of different vents for a lot of different purposes. And
this has one.
This has one intake. And in an extreme weather situation, what you would do if you had to evacuate is you would close off that intake.
This home in Los Angeles, the only one still standing in its neighborhood, followed similar building principles. But the challenge for some homeowners is the cost. It can be up to 7% more to build a home like this, and that might be one reason why just 6 of the 300 homes that have been rebuilt in this town are passive. But there is another way that the state of Colorado is dealing with this on a much larger scale, and that's a new state law.
Right away, I was shocked that we don't require building standards.
Lisa Cutter is a Democratic state senator.
Why was that surprising to you?
If your house isn't well protected and you don't do everything you can and mitigate for fire around the property, et cetera, then you're putting your neighbor's house at risk.
In Colorado, more than 1 million structures are built in places that meet or mix with natural areas where there's a threat of wildfire. Across the U.S., it's 48 million homes, or a third of all housing. Cutter pushed for the creation of Colorado's Wildfire Resiliency Code Board. It will identify areas with the highest wildfire threats and, for the first time, enforce mandatory wildfire construction codes.
People should be building in a way that's appropriate for the environment they live in.
When you think about climate change, do you feel like you need to be prepared for things that are worse than you ever thought they were going to be?
I mean, we've experienced something that I never thought you'd experience, and I'm ready for it to happen again.
Across the West, the time has come for some people to rethink how they live with fire and how they rebuild from it. For Eye on America, David Schechter, Superior, Colorado.
All right, so let's go from the state of Colorado to right there in the middle of the country, Minneapolis, Minnesota right now. And here's your headline. It's something called a polar vortex. Jess, I don't know about you, but when I hear those two words, I sit up, I pay attention. It sounds serious.
It is very serious, and it's going to be alarming for some community members, anywhere from the Dakotas all the way down into states like Texas, Louisiana, down into Florida. This right here, this storm that's pushing across throughout the next 24 hours, that's not even the biggest concern for us. It's the cold, dense air on the back end that's going to fill most of the continental U.S. as we head into the coming days. So taking a look behind me, I want to show you how those temperatures are going to kind of play out for us. This cold, dense air mass is moving from the north as it pushes throughout all these states. And it's going to bring in some snow for our friends in the Sierra and, actually all the way over into the Rockies, where we can expect anywhere up to around 8 inches just in Colorado. But here's the big story for us. It's the temperatures that we're talking about diving into Saturday's forecast and flipping the page all the way into Sunday. Here's what we're gearing up for. Below freezing temperatures anywhere from Bismarck over into Minneapolis. We're also expecting very chilly conditions down into states like Kansas and all the way into Texas too. Close to around 30 degrees for our daytime highs, with that wind chill factor kind of playing into it too. So these temperatures are going to be well below average for this time of year as we even head into early next week. And it's going to be noticeable widespread throughout the state. So millions of Americans are expected to be dealing with cold, below freezing temperatures. And as we head into early next week, we're going to see a very similar trend too. I want to talk about one more thing as well. It's this right behind me. Let's zoom out real fast so you can see this. This polar vortex stretches that Arctic air all the way down into states like Georgia and Florida. So even though they're not dealing with necessarily below freezing temperatures, we're flirting with it. And that is well below average for this time of year. So Reed, lots to talk about. You know, there's a lot of football games happening this weekend that are going to be impacted by this. Millions of Americans probably just trying to bundle up and stay warm inside. But the reality is you need to probably prepare now. I mean, grab the food, grab the gear, hunker down, stay inside, hope that your heater works.
Right.
That's the other big one too.
Yeah, and our thoughts for the safety of everybody. But you also have to think about the travel plans for so many people who had planned to go to Washington, D.C. and now know it's going to be so cold there. It's driving a lot of the inauguration events inside.
Exactly.
Any advice for the people in Washington, D.C.?
I mean, we're all going to be experiencing it, right? These cold temperatures are going to be noticeable from the north of the states all the way down into states like Florida and all throughout the south. So the best thing you could do, just bundle up, stay warm, be very careful out there. At least once the storm system moves through, all we're dealing with is cold, dense air. So on the bright side, road conditions should be okay.
Okay, Jess, thank you so much. And thank you for watching CBS News 24/7. The news continues with our partners there in the Big Apple. Stay safe, everybody. Try to stay warm.